Hello and welcome to Tremaine's Tangents. Today we are discussing The Dead Past by Isaac Asimov.
Oh.
What?
Oh, when you said we're doing an Asimov short story, I kind of just assumed it would be iRobot or Bicentennial Man.
Well, Jag, you know, we can't just do the most obvious ones. We have to try to, you know, get cutting edge. We're trying to get popular, Jag.
Ah. Well, what is The Dead Past, then?
Oh, you haven't read it?
Maybe some of our listeners haven't read it. Explain it for them, my friend.
You didn't read it? What? Now, you're starting to make me wonder if you're even doing the research. The research to the other thing.
The other thing?
The COC. Creation,
yep.
create... Yep. Alright, so moving swiftly on. So for those of you who are not in the know, The Dead Past is a short story written by Isaac Asimov. I found it in the Complete Set Stories Volume 1 of Isaac Asimov's... Oh, God.
I found it in the Isaac Asimov audiobook collection at archive.org. It's book 643 in the Isaac Asimov collection. So scroll really far down. It's about 2 hours long.
Oh, God.
If you haven't read the book or listened to the audiobook, do so now. As I say, archive.org, you can just listen to it. It's good.
If you send me the link, I'll put that in the description too. So if you don't care for listening to amazing short fiction, we will elaborate. So Isaac Asimov, being the nerd he is, wrote a lot of scientific fiction. And
he's not a nerd anymore. He's cool now.
He's dead. And there's nothing cooler than being dead. Edgy. There we go. So when he wrote this, so this is, I think, number what in the Multivac series?
3. It's the
number
third
3.
in the
Okay,
Multivac
so it's if you don't know what the Multivac is, this is what Isaac Asimov assumed computers would be like, supercomputers, I think.
Yeah. So it's a massive supercomputer. Later on, so it was the automatic computer, and then later redefined as analog computer. And it's just a big old vacuum tube machine. Later on, it's multiple connected together in one of the earliest imaginings of an internet.
Yeah, I can't remember which other story it is, and we should probably not get too sidetracked already. But it is Tremaine's Tangents. So, but there's a story that he wrote with the Multivac where you go in to vote, and people are randomly selected to vote, and I can't remember exactly, but it was a really weird concept of how a democracy would operate, where like a few people were chosen to vote randomly, and then they would, whatever choice they made, they were unaware of what the consequences were.
So that would be franchise, where the computer picks a single person, asks them questions, and based on the results, it makes decisions.
Ah, yes, that makes more sense.
But yeah, the question, it isn't like, who should be president? It asks, you know, like, other questions, and then...
What colour is a rainbow? What colour is a rainbow? Incorrect! Exterminate! Exterminate! No, it's scientific, so it doesn't ask what colour is a rainbow, because the rainbow is multiple colours. Bitch. Unless you're a dog, in which case it's all grey. So...
I think dogs would see, like, maybe 3 or 4 colours in a rainbow.
3 or 4 shades of grey. Oh no. Okay, so getting back to the book, to the story. So Jag has actually read it, because if he hadn't, I would have whipped him.
I'd read it long ago. I've listened to the audiobook recently.
Yeah, so the book sort of the story revolves around this this idea of neutronics, I think is the term.
Yep, that's right.
Which is based on neutrons? Neutrinos. Sorry, I'm not the science guy. I'm the editor / advertiser / everything else. So when this science that he made up doesn't exist. It never existed. It never was going to exist, I think, as Jay explained to me. But basically, through this science, you can create something called a colonoscope.
No, that was something else, which I'm not going to get into. A chronoscope. You just said colonoscope.
Fuck! They've all got such stupid names, and they all sound the same. Is that racist? Cut that.
Frankly, I don't want either of those going there, but at least one is supposed to. So,
Jake had a colonoscopy. So, Jake, do you want to tell the kind viewers what you said to the anaesthetist or whoever had the drugs?
Oh. Yes, apparently we're talking about colonoscopies now. I asked if they do a take-home bag for the medicine, and they said no, which was quite sad.
Yeah, I recently had a surgery, and I think they get, because I can't have benzos because I'm on regular benzos, they gave me, I think Jake suggested barbiturates.
And they gave you irregular benzos.
And it hit me like a fucking wall, I'm telling you. I was just like, one minute I was like, oh, this is not that bad. Oh! Like, oh, man. Anyway, enough about drugs. So,
That sounds more like saying like propofol, especially if it was IV.
Oh, yeah.
Which, whew. Yeah, milk of amnesia. Good stuff.
Oh man, and then there was the hot chocolate machine, which I still haven't gotten over. No, so the little things. So the story revolves around this guy who goes looking to use the chronoscope. To look back on ancient Carthage. He believes ancient Carthage is a connection to America in some way, which to me was initially suspicious because Carthage, for those of us who are history students, doesn't really have a lot of parallels with America.
Yeah.
Especially not at that time. I suppose you could argue that there were two competing superpowers like Carthage and Rome, but even then that's still not true or really even relevant. But anyway.
So he has a monomaniacal obsession that Carthage has been maligned through history because all we know about them was written by other people. And, you know, if all you have is biographies written by someone's enemies, they're gonna sound bad. Yeah.
Like how my biography review is gonna be, like, horrific, Yeah,
because I'm gonna write it.
You're my ghostwriter. No, I pay you in peanuts. Literal peanuts. They're not even good peanuts. Those candy peanuts that taste of nothing.
Prefer them over boiled peanuts.
Oh, you can't even eat peanuts, can
Well, can't eat much. Which is fine, I happen to hate the taste.
Oh, okay. So anyway.
The main character, Arnold Potterley, with his obsession with Carthage. How would you describe him in a physical sense?
Well, quickly opens the book. As a professor of ancient history, I would say he looked like a professor of ancient history. Now, if you were to do that today, you would not get away with it. There is not a magazine in the world that would let you get away with it. What did he look like? He looked like a professor of ancient history. What does that look like? Someone who would look like a professor of ancient history.
Like Arnold Potterley, professor of ancient history.
Right over the coals of fire.
Times have changed. You wouldn't be able to get away with that. You wouldn't be able to get away with sexually harassing women at conventions.
Well, there's some stories.
Because they don't get away with.
Hashtag me too.
You too?
No. I meant... Let's cut that. There's going to be a lot of me saying let's cut that. Because I just go through it and go, you know what? Not going to cut that.
Fair enough. I don't like the band anyway. Their music's not for me.
That's not going in the tagging. That was shit.
No, you too with Bono. Okay, so
Bono, yeah. So as we
he looks like a professor, and he wants to have real information on Carthage. So far, reasonable, isn't it?
Yes. Well, no, but so the book then goes into. You can hear the sound of pages shuffling. So as you go through the story, you start to realize the Carthage thing is a bit strange. He bumps into this other professor. Actually, Jag, you take over this because I'm not entirely sure I've got the right story.
Okay, so The Dead Past, written in 1955, published 1956. So, as he said, Arnold Potterley wants to know more about Carthage, goes to the government, a person called Thaddeus Araman, and is like, hey, we gotta know more, this is important history stuff to know, and he's just told, nope, that is a terrible use for the chronoscope, you know, the government has one, and we use it for more important stuff. Which is odd, because there's these monthly periodicals released about stuff they've discovered with the chronoscope, and it's all, you know, we've seen how the Romans built their roads. We've, you know, all you know, stuff that we do want to know. But it does cut to the bureaucrat's perspective, and he's quite proud of what he calls service through negation, which is to say, it's his job to refuse people access.
Yeah.
And that's all. That's his entire job.
So sort of like a flight attendant refusing people's ability to go to the toilet.
Well, that's because people get horribly injured if they go the wrong place. Planes are dangerous.
No, they're not!
In the tube, hurtling in the sky.
I want to take a shit before we take off!
Oh, you want to go to the bathroom? You want to go to the bathroom? So are we doing like a full recap of the story?
Yeah, just...
Okay. He gets a bit bothered, so he starts talking to family, mainly, but also co-workers. So so a new researcher, a science writer, and is like, can we make a chronoscope? Because they're not going to give me access to it. I don't know why. Can we make one? I find that there's a bit of weirdness around the chronoscope. There is a single paper about neutronics by Stravinsky from years ago, when the chronoscope was first made, and then nothing ever again. It looks like information's being suppressed, which is suspicious. It goes into the mind of the character a bit. His obsession with Carthage and his belief that they didn't do child sacrifice is a way to exonerate himself for a fire that he may have accidentally started, which killed his child. They make a chronoscope. Wow. Ooh. Turns out to be kind of easy. And then he sees his wife just getting obsessed with it. Like, she was pushing as hard as he was to make the chronoscope. And he's like, I want to see Carthage. And then she's like, I want to see our daughter. And he's like, oh, if you get access to this, you're going to wither away. You're going to stop living your life. You're just going to repeat what little time you had with her. Because you can't interact with these things. It's basically a videotape of events that have just happened. Which is the twist. It can't see back in time that far. It can only show I believe it was 125 years, they said, a century and a quarter. Which means that all of the releases by the government are fake. At one point during the story, I thought maybe there was no chronoscope, but there is. It's around this time that you're supposed to be thinking, but if you can, like, it's true. You would do these toxic things, like relive, the best moments and not live your life, or you'd potentially relive traumas. And then the government comes in, basically, and says, hey, that's not the problem. The problem is you can see a second ago. You can see anything. So, it's like, okay, yeah. It's like the government man shows up, and it's like, well, I knew you'd all be here because I saw you discussing it. I know you hid the thing, the materials about it, because I saw you do it yesterday. I know everything. And it's like, oh, okay, well, that means there'd be no privacy. You can set it to 100th of a second ago and see what, basically a live view of what someone's doing right now. That opens up every government worker to blackmail. That destroys all forms of secrecy. If you've got nothing to hide, what's the problem? Well, I've got nothing to hide, but I still don't want you putting a camera in my toilet.
Especially not Jag's toilet, so...
I'm not committing any crimes, but...
Well...
Shall we not?
Well, you are committing crimes in that toilet, but let's just move on from
Not
that.
in a legal sense. Crimes against nature, perhaps.
So...
the chronically ill.
So eventually, I think it was the science writer who...
Yeah, he jumped the gun on the information. So the scientist himself had put a bundle of information, everything, all the knowledge required to make a chronoscope in a packet, in a safety deposit box, told the science writer, hey, if I go missing, go get that and release it. And the science writer went... so Ralph Namo's his name, went, now fuck that, grabbed it immediately and sent it to like a dozen publishers and was like, technically he agreed that I'd have publishing rights. I don't have to wait for him to go missing. I'll send it out. But the government man explains the problems, and they're like, oh no, we should not have given this information out. Leading to an amazing final line. Did you want to say the final line? I do have it in front of me.
Hold on, let me just open up my my book. And here it is. He saluted each of the three with elaborate formality. You have created a new world among the three of you. I congratulate you. Happy Goldfish Bowl to you. To me, to everyone, and may each of you fry in hell forever. Arrest rescinded.
So Goldfish Bowl, of course, being like, the panopticon. Like, our future is a goldfish bowl. Everyone will see not just what we've done, but what we will ever do. I could maybe handle... I'd go crazy, but it would be easier to handle, from this moment on, everything you do will be known. But it's, from this moment on, everything you've ever done will be known. And everything you do. Ooh, which is rough. And the sort of as a panopticon, the lack of privacy that outstrips anything in, Fahrenheit 451, Brave New World, or 1984. This is absolute knowledge by everyone, not just the government, who was actually, surprisingly, benevolent in this story by trying to prevent people from having a way of absolute surveillance.
So if you're wondering, well, what's the big deal? Imagine that really bad stomach ache you had last week. Do you really want people seeing that? Now, there's nothing wrong with what you did, but do you want people seeing that? And you've done something wrong. You've definitely done something wrong. And now that's known. Everyone knows. And this connects into something Jag and I talked about when we were discussing this episode. Was this is sort of what if quantum computers can. Was that it? Quantum computers, if they can break.
If quantum computers can break encryption, there's no privacy. Internet banking is ruined. Anything that has a password basically doesn't anymore.
Yeah.
Email, open. Banking, open. Messaging, open. Accessing your government stuff, your tax returns, open. Everything, open.
And you anarchists may think that's a good idea, but for us living in the real world...
Anarchists generally believe in personal privacy.
Do they?
Yeah.
Oh,
they don't believe in power structures, by and large. But they still believe in personal rights. It's just, without a power structure, it's hard to enforce them. So it's weird. That's why most self-prescribed anarchists are actually some form of maybe minarchist, which is the government has to be as small as possible, no bigger than it absolutely needs to be, to ensure personal rights, basically.
Okay.
Maybe talk to an anarchist someday, Mr. Tremaine.
I have, and they all have told me the same thing, which is, if you've got nothing to hide, then you've got nothing to fear. Maybe they were libertarians. I don't know. Anyway.
That does more sound like maybe a libertarian.
Anyway, so the what else? So something you
hide. Why we?
The Chekhov gun that you brought up, which is something I was not aware of in fiction, which is this idea that if something is mentioned early on in the story, it is the thing that kills. Is it the main character, or is important?
So, I believe the short version is if a writer features it, it has to have a reason.
Right.
Hemingway disagreed.
Hemingway.
E.J. Simmons put it as, one must never place a loaded rifle on a stage if it isn't going to go off. It is wrong to make promises you don't mean to keep. Or if in the first act you have hung a pistol on the wall, in the following act it should be fired. Otherwise, don't have the pistol.
Right, so the Chekhov gun in this story is the cigarette. So,
Yeah.
in the story you will notice people around him are trying to smoke, and he really, really doesn't like smoking. And for a man in the 50s, that would have been like a... what the fuck? For me, it wasn't weird.
It seems like an odd neuroses for the 50s. It's normal. Yeah, he sits in someone's office, they go, welcome, sit down. They'd open up their little ornate cigarette case and go, smoke? And he'd recoil, he'd be like, oh, no, thank you. And it's like, that is bizarre.
For me,
like, if you don't smoke, you just say no, and the person smoking smokes. In the bus, the restaurant, the maternity ward, it's the 50s.
The airplane.
Airplanes.
So the reason Jag actually picked up on that, I didn't, because my grandfather, who was, I think in his...
so of a similar time frame.
like 30s or 40s during the 50s, something like that. He was really old. He
that sounds about right for a grandfather.
He didn't smoke. He never smoked, and he didn't like people smoking around him. And so to me that was normal. I just went, oh yeah, he's just like Bob. And so that completely slipped me by, and I think that's quite interesting in terms of fiction, to see how different things can slip you by through your experiences. So something that may seem odd to others, and this is something to bear in mind when you're writing as well, is not everyone's going to get the picture, but you shouldn't try to spoon feed it. Because if Asimov tries to spoon feed it, now that I look back at it, because he's really, really hamming up how afraid of cigarettes this guy is. And
yeah, he did hang a lamp. To me, he hung a lampshade on it a bit. And I think to people of the time, it would have been the same.
But nowadays, because if you smoke, generally you do it outside, and generally you don't offer a cigarette to someone because they're expensive as fuck.
And when I was young, it was 50 cents a smoke, and that was expensive. Now, Jesus. Over $1. For the cheap ones.
For the cheap ones.
Christ, glad I never took it up.
Yeah, is that why you're glad you never took it up?
Yeah, I just stuck to the nose candy. The nose candy and the go-go juice.
Are you jabbing? What the fuck is going on? Nose candy and go-go juice? What are you talking about, you crazy ass motherfucker? What's go-go juice?
I think it's just any like injectable amphetamine or something.
Oh my god.
Nose candy is, of course, cocaine.
Cocaine. Everyone knew what nose candy was.
The way you were saying it, like, nose candy and go-go juice, like they were equally bizarre.
Go-go juice, I didn't know. I assumed nose
Probably
candy
not a
was
thing.
cocaine. I assumed nose candy was cocaine because We all love cocaine in this podcast, including Archie.
Can't go wrong.
If Dr. Freud did it, you should do it too. Hashtag cocaine for everyone.
So that was, the lampshade. Him being so vehemently opposed to cigarettes.
Yeah. So
bizarrely so for the time.
Yeah. So that was a Chekhov. Yeah, that was the Chekhov gun. And then the what was some of the other things you brought up that that you want to bring up that
I've got a massive list.
Okay, well go ahead.
He looks like a history professor.
We've gone through that.
We've covered that. I just felt it was ballsy.
Hey nerds, suck on this.
What does a history professor look like? Indiana Jones?
Indiana James.
Just there was a line which stuck out to me, which I loved, which was, thinking back on it later, I had no premonition of danger, and I was like, ooh, there's danger! Doing an aside that jumps into past tense like that, it was like, it was pretty effective. The whole idea, or at least what was the whole idea, because I feel like the focus changes throughout, which is good. It goes along with my theory that this is actually a mystery story, if anything. But it starts with intellectual anarchy versus freedom of scholarship.
Right.
The two perspectives on the same thought. So this whole idea of, should people be allowed to just research wildly? Of course, this is post-nuclear bomb, so there is that worry of like, technology can be actually dangerous, not on a we've built better dynamite, but existentially dangerous. Like, you can destroy humanity if you research the wrong thing. Not wrong. Maybe not wrong at all. But it makes you think, like, because my immediate thought is, you should be allowed to research. What you do in your research should be limited by things like ethic boards.
Yeah, so this is where
ideas should be allowed to be explored. Yeah. Should we feed the hungry the homeless? That's an idea that should be allowed to be explored. The answer is no. Why not think of it? Whereas you think there should be stuff that is actually taboo and verboten? Who decides? How do you decide?
Yeah, and that's why generally ethics boards are made up of multiple disciplines and some of the top-ranking professors in the university. And so, what we generally... Well, so... How do I put this? I think... So, this is something I thought when you brought this up initially, which... Was Asimov talking about that because we had just come out of the era of science being completely anarchical? Because, you know, there was the Japanese with Unit 1387?
No, not that. It was a 3-digit number, 731.
731. And then obviously Dr. Mengele in Auschwitz. So
America doing the same, the Tunguski experiments.
Yeah, so we had a lot of experiments being done on people without permission, without any sort of morality in place. And so a lot of people were probably thinking, well, good, now science is reined in, and now we can go about our lives without worrying that we're going to get injected with
What was?
No, it wasn't heroin. What was it? It was acid.
Oh, MK Ultra secretly giving people LSD.
LSD.
And then seeing what happens when you do. I was still stuck on the Tunguska experiment, which is secretly giving people syphilis and seeing how badly they die. Which is pretty nasty.
Which pretty much is what the Japanese did with, what do you call it? Pneumonia and frozen limbs. Hypothermia, yeah.
Hey, we learnt a lot about how to cure hypothermia from that. It's just a horribly unethical way of doing it.
And that's what I often... Because people...
Why not animals? Animals get hypothermia. And there are big animals, too. Like...
It's just...
We can look at it and go, clearly that was wrong. Like, so obviously.
It's always cartoonishly, villainously wrong. Like... There's no defense for that. Like,
I couldn't make up things as bad as what actually happened.
It's like that scene from Family Guy where they have like a rabbit and they put lipstick on it, and then they go. And then they pull a gun out and shoot it, and like, well, now we know the lipstick isn't bulletproof. And it's the same thing. It's like, what?
This clothing was tested on dogs. It didn't fit. Yeah.
It's also not bulletproof.
This lipstick was tested on animals. They looked stupid. That'd be much better than. Oh, yeah. As I like, we're much worse than anything would make up for a fiction.
Because, it's very easy to...
We should be about it.
Oh, God. So, moving on, is there anything else you want to discuss?
Oh, sure. There's very human moments in the way the main character and his wife had these hopes and dreams for their past daughter. And the different ways they reacted. Very standard gender norms in that.
Yeah.
The wife fell into a sort of depression, and the man fell into an obsession with work. So very traditional, but very human, and again, mid-1950s, very true. So, did you like how it was portrayed? Like, did you find the lady's response a bit much? Did you find his response a bit unrealistic, perhaps?
No, I think for a 50s guy, that was totally correct. The gender norms at that time, I think, were followed.
Yeah, so this was before the swinging 60s and all that.
So the idea that the wife without the child falls into a depression because she has nothing to do is true, because she had nothing to do but ruminate over the loss of her child, and the man had nothing to do because his choices were drinking, working, or
dying.
Dying, yeah, exactly. We like to think that there was that life was better. Well, sorry, there are people who like to think that life was better in the 50s, but really, you didn't have much choice.
I mean, to be fair, this is
except for
post-Freud. Like, therapy existed. And
yeah, but it was kind
Asimov didn't even consider it as a possibility.
It was also very crude and a good way to end up in an asylum if you were a woman as well.
Well, I mean, she was hysterical. Her womb had gone wandering.
Yeah. So we need a doctor here. Stat, what? Give her an orgasm. So
fetch me the steam-powered.
Marital aid. No, so the thing is, right, about therapy in the 50s is because of Freud's insistence on it being a science and not a philosophy or an art, it sort of became quite rigid in its way. So the way Freud did psychotherapy or talking therapy, he was very fluid with how he did it, but then very rigid with how he wrote it, which is typical for a Germanic person. So even Jung, who I guess took it to a more philosophical place, even he struggled with making it scientific, because really psychology, from a layman's point of view, from my layman's point of view, isn't really a science. It's very hard to nail down a one-size-fits-all kind of thing.
Well, that doesn't exclude it from being a science, but well, I get what you mean. It's yeah.
So, take for example, if you were in medicine, you could not say, "Oh, yeah, I treated him with this, and this," and it kind of worked. They would just go like, "Sorry, what? You gave him morphine, this, that, then you cut his leg off and then sewed it back on. What?" There's so much mishmashing of different therapies and different types of therapy that eventually what you're treating your patient with is some sort of Frankenstein's monster of different therapies that work. Certain aspects of it work on the patient and certain aspects don't work on the patient, so you have to sort of work around that thing to make the patient well again, or as well as they can get. So is there anything else?
Quite often therapy at the time wasn't for people who were a bit sad or suffered trauma. It was for what they would have termed, lunatics. It was for the really unwell. The idea that you would get some help because you're in a bit of a slump. Like, no.
They would give you some barbiturates, which would...
Or cocaine.
Oh, cocaine.
So
do you know what's going to be bad, right? If one day this takes off and
our sponsors are going to be furious.
No.
He's always a bit furious. He's always out of his mind on cocaine.
So, old Cocaine Jim giving us like $100 a week.
If you want to sponsor the podcast, send cocaine too.
No. We both know I wouldn't be able to control myself.
I wasn't giving your address, but...
I want the cocaine.
Alright, send us money for cocaine. Is that better?
Send me money for cocaine.
It'll
trickle down to Jack.
Please, may I have some more cocaine?
What if someone wrote that? Like, what if we tried to write a story about just Oliver Twist, but it's all about cocaine?
I mean, we can. It's public domain now, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
I mean, they made Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. Made Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. I think you could do Oliver Twisted on cocaine.
It's free to anyone out there who wants to write a story about Oliver Twist being on cocaine.
Speaking of stories, So I feel that this does come a lot from basically nuclear bombs. I think there's parallels there in that, like, as I said, science can be dangerous, but also, like, if you try to stop it, someone else is going to do it.
Right.
And so, maybe certain types of science should be controlled by a, hopefully, benevolent authority.
The obvious problem being, where do we find a benevolent authority? So,
Probably not in our planet. And if there's aliens, probably not them either. So, fuck.
just walk in. Okay, I want to use this machine that turns water into cocaine. Who's in control here? And then you just see a rabbit sitting there, just like, so wait, you control the entire. Can you even talk? What's going on? What? And then there's just a single gunshot, and you just see a cat. It just cuts the guy with a carrot through his throat, and that's the end of the story. Oliver twisted on cocaine.
Good movie too. Shoot 'em up. I mean, it's not a good movie, but you mentioned someone getting shot through the throat with a carrot, so I thought I'd bring it up. So, I mean, there's more. I feel like the ending, as you said, like, you know,
Twilight Zone.
Welcome to the, you know, welcome to this fishbowl future. May it be thrown in hell forever. Kind of felt a little bit like Oppenheimer's I Am Become Death, except this is someone else coming up to him and being like, "Hello, folks, you am become death."
I saw it as a Twilight Zone moment, so to me it was like...
It's not a happy ending.
Yeah, well, yeah, to me it was like the part where... it was...
Now I have all the time in the world to read.
Shut up.
My glasses broke. Thankfully I know Braille. My hands fell off.
Shut up!
Well, you know,
scary
my eyesight's not actually that bad. My eyes fall out.
And then he just falls apart. Yeah, this is... No,
the question I had for you,
yeah,
because I love the terminology of the time. Do you see yourself as more of a queer duck or a dangerous rascal?
Queer duck.
Fair enough.
And if you're wondering what queer meant back then, it meant weird.
Odd, unusual, outside of the norms.
And
the guy
now
who
it
talks
means...
to himself while walking down the road would be considered queer.
It still sounds weird, doesn't it? We can change. We can know that it's changed, but it still just sounds weird. Like queer duck,
it became what it means
duck.
Now as a euphemism. Like, what's that person's deal? Oh, he's a bit queer, and then it just became more specific.
Then it became an insult against gay people. Then it became somehow embraced by the gay community, which is like the...
It was reclaimed. Yeah.
It's like, you know, that word, it starts with F and ends in agate. It's like them claiming that word. It'd just be weird, like one day we're walking down the street and my grandson's like, "Oh, look at that that guy over there." It's just like, what did you just... Oh, right, yeah, that's fine.
I mean, I've been called that in a setting where it wasn't malicious.
Oh. It's already happening.
Yeah, no, it was amusing. It was fine. It's all about intent now. And usually if you're calling yourself something, it's basically always fine. I say basically because if you're... Again, intent. Now, I mentioned earlier that this feels like a mystery story. It felt sort of like his Black Widow's stories, for example.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't have action. And when I was thinking of the narrative structure, all the conflicts are
linear,
low stakes, quickly resolved, and the story it's very linear. It's a very straight narrative. Because you'll recall we spoke with some published authors, and we're like, oh, Mugwort follows the Fichtean curve, for example, as opposed to the 5-part structure that you normally see or often see. How do you feel about that pacing and about the flow of it in that way?
So the reason I think that it's fine is because of what Kurt Vonnegut said on this exact topic, which is when you have a story that has a completely linear storyline, it's one of the classics. It tends to be like Hamlet, he argued, is completely linear in how it's told, because he wrote he goes on to the video is very good. It's Kurt Vonnegut on the structure of stories, and he draws a X and Y axis, and then he basically does the Man in the Hole, he does this Cinderella, he does Great Expectations, and then he goes to Hamlet and he says, well, all these conflicts are sort of resolved very quickly, or they don't really matter. And he just draws a straight line and he says, that's Hamlet, one of the greatest stories ever written, and it's linear. And there's really he doesn't really give a reason why that's a big deal. So you're sort of left to interpret, does this mean I should write linear in a linear fashion? Does that mean old fiction is not as good as we think? It's up to interpretation.
You should write in the fashion that fits the story, obviously.
All the time.
It's just, what is this, it's figuring that out that's the hard part.
Yeah.
But as someone who writes, do you decide on narrative structure first? Or do you write and see what the story takes?
From what I have seen from other authors and from what other writers and authors is plot is secondary to character nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're writing, you're more more likely to go with what your character seems to want in some sort of crazy schizophrenic dream. And when you get to that place, the structure sort of forms itself. It's sort of like
I suppose to simplify it, do you, when you're writing, are you like, oh, it's been too long since there's been a conflict?
No.
I'm focusing too much on just stuff happening, and I haven't touched on an actual event.
Well...
Or are you like, the story wants me to write him having dinner?
Well, so what it depends on what part of the process again. So in the first draft, you can tend to just write whatever you want. Second draft, so the final product will not have him eating dinner. But if it's necessary for you to write that, just to get it out of the way, then you write that. It may not show up in the final product, sort of like a carving. We carve down all the gnarly bits that don't need to be there, like dinner, like waking up, like going to the toilet.
The best way I've heard it said is, you can't edit an empty page.
Yes.
So you're going to write down all of that stuff, and if it doesn't fit, you'll just remove it later, yeah?
Well, it's sort of like how you never see anyone in Star Wars go to the toilet.
which is fine, because I assume they're just not showing that part. But you also never see anyone in the TV show 24 go to the toilet, and that covers second for second 24 hours of someone's life. He's gotta poop.
And but the thing is, no one wants to see that. People think
Well, we gotta be less absolute. Most people don't want to see that, or many people don't want to see that.
So
you know, there's people who want to see Jack Reacher doing poops, but we don't cater to them.
So here's the thing, right? This is where fan fiction pisses me off. The reason fan fiction is
too much pooping.
The reason fan fiction is never as good as the original stuff is because they're just catering to what you said you wanted. And and here's the thing. Most of the time the audience doesn't really know what they want. Now, I add that does sound snobbish. Let me explain why. The audience doesn't know what it wants in the end not because it's stupid or anything. It's because if it knows what it wants and it gets what it wants, you see what I'm saying? So
it's usually not actually satisfied.
It's not as satisfying, and also, at the same time, you should obviously give the audience what it wants, but that is for more popular fiction. So science fiction at this time was not popular fiction. It was for the nerds. It was for the scientists.
Damn, was it good?
Shut up, nerd. So
the stuff that survived, the crap stuff we've forgotten about. That's why we think it was so good. Yeah.
So
why was music always so good? There was a lot of pop that we just forgot. A lot of rubbish music. It's gone.
Tubes. So yeah, so the thing I was trying to say is, so when you're writing popular fiction, you're not writing to just give the person what they want. You're taking them on a journey to get to where they want to be. So I think Lee Child, whose BBC Maestro I'm watching, explained it as people want things in their life that they'll never get. So he wrote the Jack Reacher he's written the Jack Reacher series, and he explained it as Jack Reacher at the time was a outcast who had just been let go from the army and now was out trying to as a soldier of fortune. So the something that had happened in a similar time period, because this was in the 90s, is there had been a big corporate restructure of everywhere, and a lot of people were out of work. And so that we immediately have a relatable story where these people now go, oh, yeah, I relate with this guy. Sure, you're not a secret. You're not someone who's got amazing super soldier power abilities, but you feel like you're being validated. So it's less about wanting what they want and more about making them feel validated and making them feel, what's the word?
In a way, seen.
Yeah. And it's a little bit about power fantasy, but you also want to make that power fantasy...
Power fantasies are good.
Well...
there's a reason popular stuff's popular. Popular stuff's popular when it's accessible, when it's fun, when it gives you...
the tingles.
What you like. I mean, I'm not one to shit on popular stuff because it's popular.
Right. Mm-hmm. So, is there anything else you want to bring up, or should we?
So not a whole lot left. We touched on most of the things I wanted here. So did you like it?
So this is
especially the ending.
So the ending I did enjoy, because I love it when these obsessed, crazed scientists get what they want and then realise that they really didn't want it.
I do like reality over happiness. Like, I suppose that's why I'm not big into things that have a Deus Ex Machina. Like, I think we're kind of on the same page where we are satisfied with harsh reality.
Yeah,
in a way.
So I'm writing Jag's read a story that I've written that's about a society that later in the future is able to filter out these kinds of people. They sort of all go along in this tube, and they are able to catch the certain people who would make trouble and pay them off with different things. And they don't kill them, they don't brainwash them, they just sort of bribe, they just give them a little bit of power, a little bit of fulfillment, and send them on their way. And that society, I think, is how it would operate under a corporate like government.
It's a better solution to the same problem, perhaps.
Yeah, so if you've got someone who's looking for a chronoscope,
yeah, and you have good reason to not permit them access to a chronoscope,
you could easily do something much like something smarter, which is having the chronoscope be what do you call it? Only accessible if you have done this, this, and this, and basically an endless list of criteria, but it's just within grasp. It's just within their grasp. It's like the carrot on the stick.
To lead them on.
Eventually they will catch on that they're not getting the carrot anytime soon. But by that time they've wasted most of their life.
There needs to be better release valves here.
Yeah.
Because in this story the pressure just builds on the main character without anyone twigging. And it's like, someone should have stopped him.
Yeah.
Someone absolutely should have stopped him.
At no point did the government think, you know what, let's just squash this right here and here and now.
Like, that's bad. I mean, it had to be for the story to even work. Like, there's certain things that we accept because you got a book. Stuff has to happen.
Conflict has to arise. Otherwise, it's literally just the chronoscope. I tried to make one. The government showed up, arrested me, and destroyed my chronoscope.
I mean, perhaps they should have some way of... I mean, not even necessarily some way of detecting it, just... I mean, he got all the materials required without any red flags being raised? If I try to make something that's not permitted now, the government will know, because they'll be like, it seems like someone is buying a lot of, precursors for drugs or something,
Fire alarms.
Yeah. Someone's bought 1,000 smoke detectors. That can't be right.
Power!
Why does someone need, a half kilo of americium? That stuff should be noticed, and that's kind of. Although I suppose in the 50s, maybe that was more realistic.
Well, yeah, they were able to make
because
drugs
there was the
easier.
nuclear Boy Scout.
Oh, the nuclear Boy Scout that you thought died in his 90s and he was actually only 36.
Of a drug overdose. You thought it was because of the nuclear stuff. As opposed
So we were
to
both wrong.
how he felt about the nuclear stuff.
He tried to do it
Okay, we were
again.
both. Yeah. Yeah, no, he kept doing stuff. That wasn't the first thing he did, it wasn't the last thing he did.
Well, now it's the last thing he did.
So unchecked science is bad, I guess.
Because you try to make an atomic reactor in your backyard. Or succeed at making an atomic reactor in your backyard. Which seems like it shouldn't have happened. But
I mean, breeders, the reactors, not people who have kids, are like the part that is prone to going critical, so don't don't do that. Now I suppose, sort of to finish up,
yeah.
what do you think was the moral of the story at the time, or the intended moral, assuming there was a moral? Because no is an answer.
Be wary of breaking the rules, I think would be the moral for that time. I think Asimov believed there were some rules that weren't meant to be broken.
Okay.
And I think that may have influenced why he wrote in such a way.
Okay. And do you think there is a more modern moral?
I would say be wary of technology and where it goes. I'm not going to say AI because I don't think AI is the ultimate downfall of humanity. But I will say things like, as you mentioned, the quantum computers. Things like putting implants in our bodies, which seems like a bad idea. If you thought it was bad that your Apple Watch could track you, imagine if it was attached to your head, Elon. Yeah, so to me it would be wary of technology, and I think that would have probably been in Asimov's moral in the 50s as well, but I think it would have been less of at the forefront.
I mean, that's kind of a moral in all of his robot books too, like unintended consequences of good ideas, or otherwise good ideas.
Alright. Well, thank you for listening for this long. We didn't plan it to be this long.
Thank you, you two, for
Thank you, Past Jack. Thank you, Future Jack.
with friends.
With friends.
The podcast, but also in general. Sharing is a kind thing to do.
Share the podcast. Tell people about it. It's no longer tangents. It's now tangents. So, so go check out the Facebook and Instagram page we have for Tremaine's Tangents. It's spelled correctly on Instagram and Facebook, I'm pretty sure. And
did you spell it correctly on the OnlyFans?
So
you'll always hate that joke.
So go check out the YouTube channel where we're releasing the VODs of this. We may start to do something new with the videos, but probably not. And don't forget to come back every Tuesday at 7 a.m. NZST, because that's when we release new episodes. And remember, in March, we will be releasing the first episode of Creation of Creativity, once all our research materials have arrived. Thank you for listening. Good day. Man, I really want some cocaine.
And good luck.
Good luck.
You'll need it.
You'll need it to face the wasteland.